Hello everybody, welcome to Gene Rizzo Fine Art. You know, all of us really like to be around the coast, around the sea, and enjoy the ambiance of the sea and the beauty of its surroundings, especially those old wooden shacks and those crusty old rusted roofs. Well, in this 4-part video series, I'm going to show you the techniques I use to paint those beautiful coastal scenes, and then you and I are going to paint each phase of Seashack right here, one step at a time. So stick around, you're really going to enjoy this. See you soon. Okay everybody, this is Seashack. It would take quite some time to paint this image a decent size, and especially in all-in-one video. It'd be kind of long, you know, it would be extremely long, and more than likely it would probably be extremely tiring for you guys who are watching a long video. Well, with that in mind, we divided this painting video into 4 painting videos. This would make it much easier for you, and I know it'll be a lot more enjoyable. Well, this particular video that we're talking about now is going to be strictly an overview. This video is an overview of what we're going to be doing, and it's also an introduction of sorts to my watercolor palette. I'm going to show you my palette along with all of the colors, how we got there, what do we use, how do we prepare for this particular image. Okay, now dividing those videos into 4 actual parts, it's going to make it so much easier and so much more enjoyable for you. You'll be able to follow along so much easier. You'll be able to playback, replay any portion of a shorter video to get to the section that you want more, that you might want to watch over and over again and use it to practice. Practice. So you can do this at any time you want with the shorter video. With a longer video, it just takes too long to try to find that spot somewhere in that video. So, with that in mind, let's actually go to my palette here. Again, this is the piece that we're going to be painting in individual parts. Okay? The first actual part is going to be the sea, the sky and the sea. And we're going to blow up this section here so that I can show you some techniques there. And then we're going to actually paint that piece right there. The second part's going to be the old wooden shack. Some area right through here. We're going to blow that section up. I'll show you some techniques as to how to get the old wood there. And then the next shot immediately after that's going to be a similar shot, but it's going to be the old rusted roof. Those are so much fun. We'll show you a whole bunch of technique for that. There's so many different ways to do all of these parts. The fourth total part is going to be the land and the foliage. Actually, the sand and the foliage. We're going to go through a little less detail with that because that's going to be for a much longer video in the future. Foliage and do trees, shrubs, those kinds of things. All right. Okay, let's get to the palette. Let me put this aside. I'm going to put my palette alongside this palette. You can actually see same colors in the palette, but let's turn this upside so you can read it. Okay, well, going around the circle clockwise, I use 3 primary reds, 3 primary yellows, and I use 3 primary blues. I do have an extra yellow and I do have an extra blue, and I'll get to those in a minute. I have a cool a neutral, and a warm of each of the major primaries, red, yellow, and blue. The only three colors the good Lord made. Now, are these the same exact colors that you should use? Well, you know what? When you see our video that we're preparing right now on how did we get here, then you will have some choices to make, and you will have some decisions to make as to which colors are going to fill those wells for you. This is how my eye sees it. Not everybody is the same. So besides what I show, you can actually talk to probably 50 watercolor artists, and I doubt that this will be the same in all 50. Everybody has their own preferences. Everybody sees things a little bit differently. Plus, there are so many reds and so many yellows and so many blues for you to choose from. And some are warm, some are cool. So let's get into detail here. This is my cool red, permanent alizarin crimson, or as I like to refer to it, PR 264. That's going to be part of that extensive video that I'm going to show you strictly on pigment and color mixing. You know, it's detailed, less boring than, more boring than painting, but probably also more necessary and more important than painting. Learning how to mix color, how to not get muddy color unless that's what you want, unless that's what you're looking for. There are ways to do both. So I've got quinacridone red, which is a thin, so to speak, red. That's PR 209. That's my neutral. I have permanent red, PR 188. And a lot of artists would have cadmium red light in here. Well, you're not going to see cadmium on my watercolor palette. For a number of reasons. It's very difficult to mix with other watercolors that are all transparent, and it overtakes those mixes. Number two, it's more expensive than other colors that are not cadmium, and it is basically my preference as to what I like to use. This is a more transparent, depends on what manufacturer you buy from. My yellows, my cool yellow is Hansa yellow. This happens to be an M. Graham, but it's also PY3, which every manufacturer manufactures. My middle shown here is Hansa Yellow Deep, PY97. Now, there are other yellows you can use. One of them is Azo yellow, which I also use as a neutral. Now, I use Azo Aurelian, I can't even pronounce it. They're both interchangeable. They have a slight tinge towards orange, very slight. So they can be used pretty much either way, cool or warm. My absolute warmest yellow is Indian yellow, PY110. There's no question about it. You would look at it at first and think it's orange. It's not. My blues are, my cool blue is phthalo blue. Yeah, phthalo blue, the very difficult color to control and use. Any phthalo is very much a staining color. When you are going to use it, make sure you know where, why, and how much, because once it's down, it's down. It's just a heavily staining color, but an absolutely beautiful color. My neutral is universal neutral. I think most artists look at cobalt blue, PB28, as being pretty much a lighter blue, not a good mixing blue in terms of its strength. By the way, the phthalo blue, this is PB15:3. So that's my neutral blue cobalt, and my go-to blue, which is also my warm blue, is ultramarine blue, which is PB29, also the universal. And by the way, in these paints, I have M. Graham, Holbein, Da Vinci, Rembrandt, and QOR represented in this palette. So they're all good. You have preferences that you can make from any of those good professional manufacturers and use the ones you want. So this side of my palette are my primaries, basically. Now I'm going to switch over to cerulean blue, which I also use sometimes as a neutral primary or a cool primary. However, I generally use it as for skies, those kinds of usages. I'll mix it with my cobalt blue most of the time. I also have another yellow, which is yellow ochre. It's an earth tone color that I use a fair amount. It's a warmer yellow, and at the same time it's a fairly subtle yellow that doesn't fight with anything else. Plus it's a good mix yellow for some things. Okay, going back around, after my primary colors, I have transparent brown iron oxide. And I use that instead of burnt umber. It's totally transparent, as its name indicates, and it's just an outstanding pigment. Next is benzimida orange, which is PO62. And I use this orange mostly. I do mix orange with red and yellow. However, when you're doing any plein air painting or even in the studio and you're moving along, you don't have time sometimes to mix a color. And plus, coming out of the tube, this particular orange, excuse me, is about as good as you can get. Orange is very difficult to mix. Excuse me. Next to it is transparent red iron oxide, and I use that transparent red iron oxide in place of burnt sienna. I still occasionally will use burnt sienna for special occasions, but I just like the transparency of both the brown and the red iron oxides. This is a vacant space on my palette at the moment. It's being taken up by raw umber, which I use along with ultramarine blue and or cobalt blue and maybe even a little bit yellow ochre to create those old wood boards, those old weathered wood boards that you see on my shack. This is yellow ochre. I just mentioned about yellow ochre. This is neutral tint. I use neutral tint. It is neutral. It's not a cool nor a warm. It's pretty basically right there in the middle. And I use it by mixing it with some of these colors to deepen them. And I also use it for shadows, depending upon what the item is I'm going to shade or shadow. This is another open spot I have. And in this palette that you see here, I have dioxazine purple in that slot. And the reason why I keep them open is because on some paintings I don't need very much of a purple or a violet color, a lavender color of some sort. I can mix it because there's not that much for it, unless I use it in shades and shadows in conjunction with some of the other primary colors. Next to it, by the way, I sometimes put a sap green in here. That depends if I'm doing the painting that I have a lot of foliage and the colors vary between the foliage. I want to have some of my sap green to use in here. And I always have Viridian. Viridian is a cool green. It's got a little blue shade, or I should say tint to it, which makes it cool. And I mentioned about cerulean blue. Okay, so this is my palette. This is the palette I use for just about painting anything and almost everything. And with these colors, if you practice, there it is, there's that dirty word again. I practice a lot. I think you'll see most professional artists practice quite a bit. It's going to take that. I mean, we, in showing you some of these things in our videos, can help you with some basics and with some techniques that you may or may not be familiar with, or may not know how to really execute appropriately. But we can't make you learn immediately how to handle these things. It's up to you. The other part is up to you. You've got to practice. That's all I can basically say at this point. Now, practice does two things for you. It's going to increase your watercolor knowledge. It's going to give you a better understanding of what you're doing and why. And the most important part of that is it's going to really build your confidence. And that's really what I teach, technique and confidence. And confidence comes from practicing. There's no substitute for it. Try things several different ways so that you can actually see what it's going to do, how it's going to turn out, and put that in your little repertoire of things and your own techniques. So that's the overview in my palette, and we're going to get to part one, which is the sky and the sea, very shortly. So we're going to try to do these to where you have about a week between each of the parts I mentioned earlier, so that you'll have time between those particular videos to do a little practicing. Okay, and when you get to the following videos on this particular coastal scene piece, or it's the series, you will paint better and your end result will come out looking much better. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit subscribe button. If you haven't already done so, ring the bell and hit that like button for us, please. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.